I'm Alice Hayes, and I had the wonderful good fortune to become the president of the University of San Diego in 1995, and I retired in 2003. And reflecting on coming to the university, I remember when the Presidential Search Committee invited me to come for an interview. And I wasn't really looking for a job. I liked what I was doing in St. Louis, but this was an opportunity that was worth exploring. And I came and I met the people. And it truly was the people that I met that made me interested in it. And then I not only wanted the interview, I wanted the job. And there were wonderful people, and there was a great sense of potential at the campus, a potential for more greatness than it had already achieved. And the people there wanted to do things. I can remember talking to people in other environments, and they would, when you'd say, well, why don't we do this? And they would say, oh, we've always done it this way. And I grew to hate that phrase. And when I came here and I talked to people in the interviews, everybody, students, faculty, staff, trustees, and I would say, well, maybe we could do something like this. And they'd say, well, that would be interesting. We could try that. Just that openness. It was wonderful. Then the university was, it needed financial resources, as all young universities do, but it had been well managed. It was good to come after art use because there were no problems of the kind that you see with fraud and things like that at other institutions. It also had some of the values that I thought were important, an emphasis on ethics, respect for the individual, things that you've heard a million times, but that really were lived here. So that's how I came, and I was indeed happy when the position was offered to me, and grateful to have spent those years here. My USD experience has shaped me as an individual in a lot of ways. I've learned things that I would never have known before. I've had experiences that I would not have had in any other kind of a position. And I think that my need to rely on God for leadership and for support led me to a greater trust in God that has changed my life. When I came here, the students were very traditional undergraduate students. They were traditional age, and they came without a lot of interest or experience in social justice or involvement. When they came here, they became involved in those things, and it changed them. It made them understand that there were people who had needs and who needed their services. And I was delighted to see students take on that kind of role. One of the things that shaped the environment very much in those years was 9/11, and that was a very powerful influence on our students, a very sobering and challenging influence. And the other thing that happened that I remember influenced our students was the year that we had the presidential debate on campus, and they all got excited about political life and opportunities to change the world, and it was rewarding to see those changes. When we had an opportunity to apply to have the presidential debate on campus, we didn't really think that we would get it because we were a small school and we had not had political involvement. But we were fortunate enough to get the opportunity to host the debate on campus. And we had to raise some funds to sponsor it, and we were able to do so. When the time came for the event, the students became very involved. They put up a big poster and where they wrote what they thought about the candidates, about Dole and Clinton. And when the candidates came to campus for the debate, they were very gracious to our students. The Doles, both Doles, Bob and Libby, met with our students and spent time talking to them. Of course, Clinton had a daughter who was approaching college age, so we gave him a package of application materials, but we're not successful in attracting Chelsea to our campus. The meetings before the actual debate were very exciting. When you would shake hands with Clinton, it was as if you were the most important person in the world. It's a wonderful gift that he had. And during the preparation for the debate, he walked all around the stage to see where he would stand so that he would always be in the camera. And at one point, he even had walked over and was standing in front of Dole's podium and had the camera. And Dole came over and kind of looked, aren't I supposed to be here? Dole had a green room, a preparation room that was in Founders Hall. And we later learned that students who were residents in Founders Hall could see into Dole's green room. And they could see what he was doing before the debate. And I will tell you, he was watching a baseball game. And this was something that they probably would not have seen if they weren't in this context. But the students really got involved, and they hosted people. They drove them around campus and talked to them about the school. And it was an exciting event. After that, when we would have meetings in Washington with alumni, there would be alumni who would say, oh yes, I got interested in this when we had the presidential debate. So it did have influences on their lives, and I think it was an important experience for them. It had also put us on the national stage, which was really one of our goals, to have the national recognition that the institution could bear it. The campus was completely taken over by all of the various organizations and activities and technicians and professionals involved in the debate. Every parking lot was assigned to something other than the people who ordinarily park there. And they parked down the hill, and they parked over at my house, and they parked everywhere they could abandon ship because there was nothing else they could do. The security was intense, so intense that they would not let me go to my own house. And they said, you cannot go down that road because, you know, that's one of the potential arrival sites. And I knew that it did not lead to the road. It led to the Casa de Alcalá. But they refused to let me in until I finally got somebody from public safety to vouch for me and say, I was the president of the university, and I did have to get my materials for the interview on CNN because they wouldn't let me down there. They set up several practice arrival spots, and nobody knew which of these was the spot that was going to be used to bring the candidates up onto campus. So there was one on what was then the West Point Field, and there was one at the Casa de Alcalá, and there was one at the other end, and they practiced having the rows of limos coming up those roads. So when the day actually came, you had no way of knowing whether what you were watching were the real security and the real presidential candidates or not. So it was disruptive, and it was marvelous. We didn't care that we were disrupted. People worked it out for the excitement of the event. Yes, we had expected that it would be an auditorium-style debate, but the political parties said no, they wanted a town hall debate. And of course, we didn't have a facility that accommodated the town hall that they wanted. And so we were able to meet with our friends at the Old Globe Theater, who came over and designed a town hall on the stage of the theater in Founders. And so they were able to create a town hall. And when the debate began, I was sitting next to President Ford, Gerald Ford, and he said to me, you know, I did this. And I thought, now what do I say? I can't say, oh, I didn't know that, you know, or how did it turn out, or whatever. So I said, well, that was a different format, wasn't it? And he said, yes, it was, and it was better. And there was a very perceptive insight. He said, in the town hall format, everybody comes prepared to ask their question. If you ask your question and the candidate does not answer it, the next person who gets to ask a question is not going to follow up on yours. They're going to ask their question, and there's no follow-up. Whereas he had been in a format where there was a series of reporters asking questions, and if you didn't answer the first person's question, the next one got after you. And I thought that was a marvelous insight into it. But for the observer, any question and any answer was interesting because it revealed what the candidates were thinking. And the average person would never have thought that there would be a difference in the way that it was handled. I would particularly enjoy on graduation days seeing those students march out. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I can never decide if I like graduation or the first week of class better. But you can see that they have become much more sophisticated and competent. They have knowledge, they have skills they didn't have before, and they have a self-confidence that they didn't have before. And one of the changes that I noticed in the students over the time that I was there and saw with each successive class is as they became involved in service activities, they became much more aware of others. You know, when they came in, they were just teenagers. They were just out of high school, and they hadn't thought of themselves as having a role in society. And then when they found themselves in the activities, they began to realize that they did. And one of the things that I liked about them was that the student organizations would take initiatives and the students would follow up. You didn't have to force these developmental activities on them. If they got interested in environmental studies, then they put up a garden on the side of the campus, or they set up a recycling program, or they did things. And that was a change that I noticed in them that I was pleased about, because the old motto of the university was "Emitte spiritum tuum," send forth thy spirit. And I thought, we are sending forth our spirit when we graduate these students. When I came to the campus, the university really was in need of technological updating. Many faculty members did not have computers. There was a computer lab, and they could go to the lab and wait their turn and get at a computer, but they didn't have the kind of support that they needed to do their research and prepare their classes efficiently and effectively. So the first thing I did within weeks of arriving on campus was to set aside a fund. I think I took the president's contingency fund and set it aside to start to buy this equipment for them. We had a good academic computing services staff. They were technologically competent, but the everyday faculty member and student did not have that kind of support. So that was a real priority for us. And at first, I thought this is going to be a very difficult challenge, because the buildings, beautiful as they are, were all old. And you'd look at the thick walls and you'd think, these did not anticipate fiber optics. You know, you couldn't just tunnel through with the fibers. And we had to do a lot of work to get us ready to take advantage of the technological developments. I had some concern about how the university would respond to a woman president. They had had a wonderful man leading them for a quarter of a century, and here was this new person who had not been a president before and was a woman. But you know, I think that the trustees just kind of felt proud of themselves for having taken this step, and they made me feel as if they were proud of themselves for having a woman president. I did not get any pushback from people on campus that I was aware of. I remember one of the deans telling me that when I came, their only thought was that they hoped I wouldn't mess it up. And I said, are your goals so small? You know, weren't you hoping for something better from a new president? Well, yes, they were, and he acknowledged it. But I didn't have much difficulty with it. In the sciences, which is my background, there were not as many women. There still are not as many women as there were men. But there wasn't, in my experience, much pushback or objection to it. And you know, when I went into academic life, I had a very traditional academic life. I was a faculty member, and then I was a chairman, and then I was a dean, and then I was a vice president, and then I came here as a president. So I had had experiences in all of those areas, and I had done teaching, and I had done research, and I had done administration. So I was familiar with the concerns of people who had different backgrounds from mine. I'm sure there were a lot of questions behind my back. What is she doing? But nobody said that to me. I felt very welcome here. When I came to campus, it was very clear that we needed to upgrade our teaching facilities. We needed new classrooms and we needed new teaching resources. So that was in the back of my mind and that of the development team when we were working on the needs for the future. The Institute for Peace and Justice was not something that the university had set a specific target for. But I had an opportunity to talk to Mrs. Kroc, and I was telling her about the various programs that we had on campus. And at that time, we had a program that had the title, Creating Cultural Competency. And what that meant was that our students, no matter what their background, racial, ethnic, religious, whatever their background was, they were going to be spending their lives working with people who were different from them in many ways. And it was our responsibility to find and create a learning environment in which they would become familiar with people who had different backgrounds, and that they would learn how to celebrate what those different backgrounds brought to the community as indeed what they could bring to the community. And I was describing this program to Mrs. Kroc, and she said, that's what the world needs, cultural competence. She said, I will help you with that. And so that was the beginning of the Institute for Peace and Justice. Now, that was not on any strategic plan anywhere that we were going to do an Institute for Peace and Justice, but we had the nucleus of it. And I was astonished when we started talking about what can we do in this direction more than the project, because the project was funded by a grant and it was going to expire. So what could we do that would react to this? And I was just dazzled by the response. The School of Law came, and we'd like to participate in this. We're very interested in arbitration and things like that, and we teach those skill sets that peacemakers need. And then the School of Business said, well, we deal and teach people negotiation. And Arts and Sciences had people in poli-sci. And throughout the campus, there were people who were already working on peace and justice under the category of their own discipline. And so it seemed to us that we could bring these people together and we could establish a center for learning. There already was, well, there were many institutes of peace or institutes for justice across the United States, but Mrs. Kroc had funded one at Notre Dame University. And the program at Notre Dame was one that was very sensitive to the threats of nuclear war. So their program was anti-war. So we thought our program is going to be pro-peace. We want to teach people how to build peace. And so we had that thrust throughout and were able to organize it. And as you know, we were able to establish the Institute and then subsequently a school. So that was, all of that was not in our minds when we began, but it was clearly there in formation for all those years. There were a number of major needs on campus, and they were met with renovation and with updating, but there still was need for classrooms. And as a scientist, I was very aware of the need for the development of the science facilities. And you would look at the old science facilities and the old lab tables and equipment and know that there was great need for updating. And so we set that as a priority. And we're indeed able to raise the funding from a good friend of the university, Darlene and Donald Shiley. Darlene had come in at first saying she was interested in having the lobby of the building named for her mother and her husband's mother. And we were just delighted that that was going to happen. And then when they came and saw the building in development, her husband Donald said, we should, have our name on this building. And so he was willing to make the additional contribution for the naming of the building. And it has turned out to be a wonderful building. The faculty committee that did the design of what would be inside and how things would be arranged just did a wonderful job and did a tremendous amount of work to make that vision a reality. And every time I look at it, I think of how many people worked on that. And there were students who are now alumni who participated in that as well. And it's funny, you don't come thinking that you're going to be involved in buildings. Those of us who come from academe come expecting to work on intellectual growth and personal development, and that is indeed what we do, but it has to be done in a setting that is supportive. And it does have to react to the times. It cannot just look like it looked. It's a good idea to have one place on campus that retains the original look and gives you a sense of history, like the library, like Mother Hill Library. You go in there and you feel the university from its very beginning, and you know that it's basically a contemplative place of study. So you need something like that. But then you need to have another place that is the newest and the most up-to-date facilities on campus, and that's where you put your admissions office, because people want to see that too. I think that the development of a rich assortment of honor societies on campus is very important for the university. For one thing, the fact that the university is invited to have chapters of these distinguished organizations identifies who our peer group is. Our peer group is not perhaps some little college down the hill, nor is it some major research institution, but our students are peers of the best students in the country. They have that academic excellence as verified by these organizations. I was particularly eager to see us get a chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, because the students who are eligible for Phi Beta Kappa across the United States are recognized as outstanding students. And you have to work to get those chapters, you have to apply, and you have to have support. And then it goes through a very rigorous visitation and selection process. Mortarboard came to us through the initiative of one of our staff members, Judith Lewislogue, working with students and realizing that when they go out to apply for jobs, it helps them to have membership in nationally recognized organizations. And she had been a leader in Mortarboard herself when she was an undergraduate and brought those skills with her. And so she helped us recruit the students and write the proposal. And once again, when they came and visited us on campus, of course, they saw that USD should have that. But they look at everything, these organizations. Phi Beta Kappa, Order of the Coif for the law school, Mortarboard, they go into your academic records, they look at transcripts, they see where your students go after they graduate. Alumni are an important part of this. And once these memberships are established, even if students find that old-fashioned or disinteresting, the fact that you have the campus chapter says something about the university and about its students. And I think when we're doing strategic planning and looking at who are our peer institutions, it's important to remember, well, we're an Order of the Coif Law School. We're a Phi Beta Kappa campus. We're a Mortarboard campus. When we joined Mortarboard, we were one of the first Catholic universities to do so. It had been primarily the top state universities that had Mortarboard chapters. But when we participated in it, then others followed. One of the distinctive characteristics of the University of San Diego is that it is a Catholic university and is committed to that in its mission statement and in the opportunities that it offers to the students and to the faculty and staff as well for their development. This does not mean that we expect that the students and the faculty and the staff and our community and the board and parents and so on will all be Catholic. In fact, in many components of the university, Catholics are in the minority. In undergraduate students, they are a majority of the student body, but that is not the goal at all. It's to create an environment that reflects Catholic values, make an attractive environment. And students who are Catholic or who are Muslim or are Buddhist or whatever will find that this is an environment that supports their commitment to religion. It says it's important for people to acknowledge the existence of God. You couldn't possibly consider yourself an educated person if you were not to have some knowledge of God, some knowledge of Christianity, some knowledge of religion. And a university that does not provide that perspective is missing something. But we do provide it, and in addition, we have, through the university ministry program, created the environment in which we expect to see a crucifix on the wall. We're not surprised when Mass is offered. When there's I remember students saying to me, everything you do at this university has a Mass attached to it. And that's probably true, because we always want to celebrate by acknowledging our gratitude to God for what has been given to us. So I would say it's very difficult to maintain a Catholic identity today in a pluralistic society compared to what it might have been in the 1950s, when there was a more traditional student body and traditional religious faculty. You would look at the old pictures of the faculty and every one of them would have a Roman collar. Now, of course, you will see people who don't have Roman collars, who are women, who are of other faith traditions. And I think that the University of San Diego has been a place to welcome people of other faiths and people of no faith commitment, to let them know that there is a respect for the judgment that they have made. But we do give them the opportunity, and we try to make a point of having theology courses available. Theology is an intellectual discipline, and theology is a way of learning about religions. And that throughout the university, we have a commitment to ethics and to those values that come from our Christian identity. I think my favorite place on campus was the Casa de Alcalá, which was the house in which I lived on campus. You know, many universities have a presidential mansion, and it's a grand building with pillars and stone carvings and all the rest of it. And the house where the president lives at USD is it's a house. It's a ranch-style house with, of course, an extraordinary view and beautiful gardens and lovely, lovely facilities. But it was always good for me to return there at the end of the day to know that even though I had left the office and the scheduled jobs, I was still at the university. I was still available to the university. And I found it a wonderful place to invite people who were friends of the university to come and not be part of a formal structure, but just be at home with me or whoever else was there for that period of time. And I truly loved it. I learned from many people here on this campus. One of them certainly was Art Hughes. Dr. Hughes was my predecessor as president. And when we would talk about things that were happening, he would not push ideas on me at all. He was very careful not to do that. But he would show such insight into issues. And if I didn't know what to do about something, I could talk to him. And I could also talk to the person who had been the provost, Sister Sally Fury, who knew the university inside out and could let me know if things were important. I had just extraordinary trustees, and they were very helpful in giving me guidance and helping me to know the university. So I had good friends in the university. I had good friends outside the university. I had a good friend at Loyola, Ron Walker, who was the senior vice president there. And he is a person who himself never had any interest in being a college president. But I would say I could probably identify a dozen people who became college presidents after working with him. And I'm one of them, and he influenced me. And Dan Durbus, who was chairman of the board when I became president, just a wonderful person. And they were all people who responded to my questions and gave me guidance or helped me meet people. USD is lucky in having that kind of community interested in it and supportive of it. I'm very concerned about the future of higher education in the United States. I'm concerned that there are initiatives that are well-intended but would be harmful to institutions like USD unless they are done very carefully. For example, there are a lot of initiatives now trying to find ways to pay for the tuition for at least the first couple of years of students at community colleges in the United States. Hurrah, that's wonderful. But if it's done that way, institutions like the University of San Diego cannot possibly compete with free tuition at another institution. And so the first 2 years of education will inevitably be done someplace else. Well, it'll be good and they'll get good education someplace else, but the university will never be able to develop the 4-year approach with a core curriculum and a major. Instead, what would happen would be that every school would emphasize its own particular area of expertise, and it would become very professionally oriented as opposed to a broader education that has 3 parts to it. It has the major, it has electives, which give you a chance to explore ideas, and it has a core. And that core curriculum is the vehicle through which many of the values are passed to students and in which many of the ideas that hold things together are developed. And I'm concerned that that is going to be lost. I'm also concerned that there is a focus on jobs. And of course, parents want their students to graduate and have jobs. Who wouldn't? We want the students to be prepared with the knowledge and the skills to have useful careers. But the job is not the purpose of higher education. We're more concerned in student development and in their formation of character. And some of that will be lost if we are focusing entirely on jobs. So I get anxious about some of these things because I believe that higher education provides an opportunity to develop a person, to become intellectually mature, more than being skilled. and to have some share of the fund of knowledge that has characterized educated people everywhere. I'm concerned that our definition of an educated person will change from this well-developed, well-rounded intellect to somebody who is very good at doing something very worthwhile, but doesn't have the rest of it. Think of another concern that I have about higher education, and I am very concerned about what I read, because I've not experienced it, of students who carry political correctness to an extreme. And they don't want to hear any idea that is different from the idea they already have, and they resent it when new ideas are presented to them, and they say their rights are being violated. And I'm very concerned about that, because part of education is the exploration and analysis of opposing points of view. And if you are only going to listen to one, you're not going to be able to make that kind of evaluation. My very first experience with online education was here at the University of San Diego. The year that I came, we had a professor of ethics, Larry Hinman, who did this ethics course online. And what he had done was he had gathered together other teachers of ethics across the country, across the world. And each of them agreed that they would teach their ethics class the way they always did. But when it came to discussing cases, which of course you would do in an ethics class, they would post the cases, the ethics cases, on this web page, and the students all over the world would be posting theirs, so that our students would not only hear the points of view of the other 10 students in the class with them, but they would hear perspectives on these cases from students all over the world, from different backgrounds, from different religious perspectives, political perspectives. They would all be looking at the same case and saying what they thought. And this was the most wonderful, rich experience for our students, you know, for a small university to be able to let students hear and discuss and talk to people all over the world. So I had a very good idea of what it could accomplish. More recently, my niece is taking a course online, and it's one of the courses, you know, open courses, a MOOC. And there are, I think she said, 25,000 students in the class with her. And she said that she had wonderful materials for the course, and she could get into the discussion section. They were required to be involved in discussions. She could always get a discussion group no matter where she was in the world. She did a lot of traveling. No matter what time it was, she could always find people who would participate in the discussion. But she never had any involvement with the teacher. And when they had all these wonderful discussions, you know, with 20,000 different people, never had any evaluation or assessment of them. Everybody said what they thought, and that was that. And in a way, and I heard this expression, I thought it's very apt, what they were doing was not what we would truly call a discussion in which there is exploration of pros and cons. They were pooling their ignorance. And that's my fear about the online courses, that we go from the wonderful undergraduate experience that we saw when I first came here to one where we have lost all sense of leadership of the student. And this is the strength of USD, and this makes it different from other doctoral universities. Most doctoral universities are research universities, and this is wonderful because we need all that research. But USD is something different. It has doctoral programs, not only professional, but also a PhD program. So it is a doctoral university, but research here, particularly undergraduate research, is rooted in the class experience, in the teaching experience. And I think that that is a distinctive approach to higher education. I don't know if we will be able to sustain it, but when faculty members come here, they expect to teach, they want to teach, and they do it. And that's the great strength of this university. Other universities that have the status of a doctoral university, as we do, really have less interest in teaching because their focus is on the research, and that's the source of their revenue, and that is what their faculty expect and want to do when they come. Our faculty expect and want to do research, but they want to use that as part of their teaching. And that's a very distinctive characteristic. And I think that focus on teaching and the Catholic framework and structure make this an institution that is quite distinct. But when I came here, you know, I had always been at Jesuit universities, and Jesuit universities are very committed to a teaching philosophy. So, you know, for the greater glory of God and the ad maiorem, always more, harder. You know, that's why they were such stern teachers. So when I came here, I said, what is the teaching philosophy of the university? And they said, Catholic. I said, more, you know, what does that mean? Well, we're a Catholic university. And I had to hunt to find what it was. And I found it in those works of Mother Hill. And it's the most interesting thing. Most universities have a commitment, we all do really, to truth and beauty, you know, and goodness. And they say if the truth is beautiful, and it will lead you to goodness. Mother Hill turned that around, and she said, let us make a beautiful place. And if it's beautiful, people will be attracted to it, which they are. And when they come here, they'll find people who are good, and they'll want to stay. And then we'll teach them the truth. And I thought she was so right. Get the people here, make them want to learn. And of course, you know, her notion of what was the truth was already defined, but it was still an openness to exploration.